The battlefield was a place of chaos. The ground shook beneath the weight of the heavy machines as the sounds of explosions echoed through the air. Soldiers from both sides were locked in a fight for survival, and Jack was one of them, a soldier. From Earth, he had been trained for moments like this, but nothing could have prepared him for the brutal reality of war. Jack stood tall, gripping his weapon tightly. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but his eyes remained focused on the alien forces charging toward him. The enemy was unlike anything he had ever seen. Alien warriors with sleek, dark armor and glowing red eyes. Their sharp weapons gleamed in the light, and they moved with a deadly precision that sent a chill down Jack's spine. But Jack was no stranger to fear. He had faced danger before and lived to tell the tale. Today, though, the battle felt different. The air was thick with tension, and the sounds of screams and explosions made it hard to think. But he pushed forward, determined to protect his people. The aliens had come to Earth with one goal: to conquer. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, but now, after months of fighting, it seemed like the humans were losing. Jack's unit had been pushed back into a corner. Surrounded by the alien forces, there was no way out, and the odds were stacked against them. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he raised his weapon, taking aim at an advancing alien soldier. He squeezed the trigger, and the blast sent the alien flying back, its body hitting the ground with a thud. But the victory was short-lived. Another alien appeared, this time much larger, with glowing red skin and horns jutting out from its head. The creature snarled, its eyes locking onto Jack. Jack didn't have time to react. The alien lunged forward, its blade aimed directly for his chest. Jack barely dodged in time. The blade slicing through the air just inches away from him. He felt the rush of wind as it passed, and his heart raced even faster. But he wasn't about to let this monster take him down. With quick reflexes, Jack shifted his stance and swung his weapon at the alien, knocking its blade aside. The alien staggered back, surprised by the force of the blow. Jack seized the opportunity, charging forward and landing a punch to the creature's face. The alien roared in pain. But it wasn't enough to stop it. Syria, the alien captain leading the charge, watched the battle unfold from a distance. She had heard of the humans' fighting skills, but she had never seen one fight so fiercely. Jack's movements were swift, calculated, and filled with a burning determination to survive. Syria felt a strange stir in her chest as she observed him, a feeling she had never experienced before in battle. As Jack fought the alien, he could feel the blood rushing to his head. His muscles burned with exhaustion, but he pushed through it. The human spirit was strong, and it was that strength that had kept them alive this long. He didn't think about the danger, he didn't think about the odds. He only thought about survival. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jack managed to land a powerful strike to the alien's chest. The creature collapsed, its weapon falling to the ground with a loud clatter. Jack stood over the fallen enemy, panting heavily, his body covered in dirt and sweat. But before he could catch his breath, another alien approached, this one even more terrifying than the last. Syria descended onto the battlefield, her jet-black armor gleaming in the dim light. She had been watching Jack, and now she knew it was time to face him. The warriors around her stepped back, clearing the way for their captain. Syria's reputation had spread far and wide. She was a force to be reckoned with, and her skills in combat were unmatched. But this human, this soldier, was different. There was something about him that caught her attention. Jack raised his weapon, his eyes narrowing as he prepared for the fight ahead. He knew he was outmatched. Syria was a warrior of legendary skill, and he had no hope of defeating her. But he wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. The two warriors locked eyes for a moment, and Jack felt a strange sensation in his chest. It was as though the world around them had slowed down, and the noise of the battle had faded into the background. All that mattered was the fight ahead. They were alone in the middle of the chaos, two soldiers facing off against each other. Syria moved first, her movements swift and graceful. She was a blur of motion as she closed the distance between them in seconds. Jack barely had time to react as she swung her blade at him. He parried the attack, the force of her strike sending him stumbling backward. But Jack refused to fall. He steadied himself and attacked, his weapon meeting hers with a clash of steel. The battle raged on, neither side giving an inch. Jack fought with everything he had, his mind focused on nothing but survival. Saria, on the other hand, seemed to be in a different state of mind. She was no longer simply a warrior, she was captivated by the human in front of her. His strength, his resilience, it was unlike anything she had ever seen before. For the first time in her life, Saria hesitated. She had been trained to kill without mercy, to destroy her enemies without thought. But Jack was different. There was something about him, something she couldn't explain. Her eyes lingered on him as they continued to fight, and in that moment, Saria felt a strange pull in her chest. Jack, too, felt the strange connection. He could see it in her eyes, a flicker of something beyond the battle, beyond the hatred they had been taught to feel for one another. It was as if their fates were somehow tied together, their paths intertwined in a way he couldn't understand. The fight continued, but the tension between them had shifted. Jack's strength began to falter, and with one final, swift strike, Saria disarmed him. She stood over him, her blade at his throat, her chest rising and falling with every breath. She could have ended it right there, but instead, she paused. Her eyes met Jack's, and for a brief moment, she saw something in him that made her heart race. Jack, on the other hand, didn't move. He stared up at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the blood from his earlier wound staining his shirt, but he didn't care. All that mattered was this moment, the connection they shared. With a whisper, Saria spoke, her voice soft but filled with something Jack couldn't quite place. "You're my fate, human." Jack froze, his heart skipping a beat. He had heard those words before, but now they carried a weight he couldn't ignore. His fate. What did it mean? What was this strange bond between them? Before he could speak, Saria turned away, her armor gleaming as she walked back to her soldiers. The battle wasn't over, but for Jack, something had changed. His path had been set. He was no longer just fighting for survival, he was fighting for something greater. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Saria stood at the front of her alien army, staring out into the distance. The humans had retreated, but the outcome of the day's battle was not what she had expected. She had crushed the enemy forces, but there was something about that human soldier Jack that she couldn't forget. His strength, his determination, it had been different than the others. She had killed countless soldiers before, but none of them had left her with this strange feeling. Saria couldn't explain it. It wasn't just the way he fought. It wasn't just the blood that stained her blade. It was something deeper. His eyes. The look in his eyes as they fought. It was almost as if they had connected in that moment, as if their fates were somehow tied together. Saria shook her head. She had been a warrior for too long to let such thoughts distract her. Her mission was clear: defeat the humans. But now, she found herself questioning everything. She didn't understand it. She had never been like this before. The thoughts that flooded her mind made her feel vulnerable, something she had never allowed herself to be. Meanwhile, Jack was being held in a cell aboard the alien ship. The cool metal walls did nothing to calm his thoughts. He tried to ignore the pain from his wounds, but the strange connection he felt with Saria kept creeping into his mind. He had never felt anything like it, even though she had defeated him. There was something in her gaze that lingered in his memory. He had been captured before, but this time felt different. This time, he wasn't just a prisoner. There was a part of him that couldn't let go of the feeling that Saria had somehow seen him. Truly seen him in a way that no one else ever had. As he sat in the cold, dark cell, Jack couldn't shake the question. Why had she spared him? She could have killed him right then and there. Why hadn't she? What was it about him that made her hesitate? Days passed, and Jack's thoughts only grew more tangled. His wounds healed, but the emotional weight of his capture and the mysterious bond with Saria weighed heavily on his heart. Saria, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking about him either. She spent long hours in her quarters, staring at the map of the galaxy spread out before her. The Alien War Council had ordered her to stay focused on the mission. to prepare for the final strike against Earth. Yet, every time she tried to concentrate, Jack's face kept appearing in her mind. She couldn't understand it. He was nothing more than an enemy, a soldier, just like the others. But when she closed her eyes, she saw him, his eyes locked onto hers. That moment, that battle, it was still fresh in her mind. The way he fought, the way he looked at her, the way his blood tasted on her lips. It was as though something had awakened inside her. One day, Saria made a decision. She walked to the holding cell, where Jack was kept, her boots echoing in the silent hallway. The guards stepped aside without a word. They knew their captain's commands were not to be questioned. Jack looked up as the door to his cell opened. There she stood, Saria, the alien warrior who had defeated him, and yet, here she was standing in front of him. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of recognition, as if their paths were meant to cross again. Saria's eyes studied him closely. Jack had been a prisoner for days, but he still looked strong. His face was a little more bruised, his uniform torn from the battle. But there was still a fire in his eyes that Saria couldn't ignore. "You've been thinking about me," Saria said, her voice low but clear. It wasn't a question, but a statement. She had sensed it, just as she had felt the pull when they fought. Jack swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "And you've been thinking about me, too," Saria's gaze softened, just for a moment, before she quickly regained her composure. "You shouldn't be so confident, human. You're a prisoner." Jack's lips curled into a faint smile. "I'm still breathing, aren't I?" Saria said nothing at first. She simply stood there, staring at him as if searching for something. In his eyes, he was different from the others. She had fought countless enemies in her life, but none had ever made her feel this way. It was as though their fight was more than just a battle. It was something deeper. "I don't understand it," Saria muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "What don't you understand?" Jack asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "This feeling, this connection," Saria said, her words hesitant. She had never been one to speak of emotions, but there was something about Jack that brought it out of her. "It's like we're connected somehow, and I don't know why." Jack's heart raced as he listened to her words. Could she feel it too? The strange bond that had formed between them on the battlefield? He didn't have the answers, but he wasn't the type to ignore something this powerful. "I don't know what it means either," Jack admitted, his voice softer now. "But I feel it too. Like fate has something planned for us." Saria took a step closer to him, her eyes never leaving his. "You're a human. I am your enemy. I should have killed you." Jack looked up at her, his gaze unwavering. "But you didn't. Why?" Saria hesitated. She had no answer. All she knew was that something in her had changed, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if she was ready to kill. "I don't know," she said quietly. For a long moment, they stood there in silence, both of them lost in their thoughts. Finally, Saria turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Jack watched her go, his mind racing. What did this mean? What had happened between them? He didn't know the answers, but he knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the end. Something had started between him and Saria, and there was no turning back. The days following their encounter were filled with silence. Jack's mind never stopped racing. He was a prisoner of war, but something inside him told him that his story wasn't over. His connection with Saria, something he couldn't quite explain, kept him awake at night. She had spared him, even though she was supposed to kill him. Why? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the alien warrior who had defeated him. Her eyes had softened in a way he hadn't expected. They had exchanged no words after their first meeting, but the silence between them spoke volumes. Saria, too, couldn't shake the thoughts of Jack. He had been a prisoner in her ship for days, and she had kept her distance. Her role as a captain made it difficult for her to show weakness, but the strange feelings she had developed for the human soldier were impossible to ignore. She had always been a fierce warrior, always focused on victory, but now there was doubt, and it troubled her. The war was not over. The aliens had come to conquer Earth, and nothing could stop them. But Saria knew that if she didn't keep her focus, things might slip through her fingers. Her alien leadership was counting on her to be the unyielding commander they all knew her to be. But her thoughts were often drawn to the prisoner she had once defeated. Days later, Syria visited Jack's cell again. She wasn't sure why she kept coming back. There was a pull she couldn't explain. Something that kept calling her back to him. She didn't speak. She just stood there for a moment. Observing him, Jack looked up from his cot. The exhaustion was clear on his face, but his eyes still held that fire, the same fire that had caught her attention on the battlefield. They locked eyes for a moment, and Syria felt her breath catch. She quickly broke the gaze, trying to keep her emotions in check, but Jack saw it. He saw the hesitation in her eyes, the uncertainty. "You don't have to keep visiting me," Jack said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "I'm just a prisoner, Syria." Syria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved closer to the bars of the cell, her gaze never leaving his. She wanted to speak, but the words felt stuck in her throat. What was she supposed to say? How could she explain the confusion inside her? Her life had always been clear. She fought, she won. Now, for the first time, she found herself questioning everything. "I don't understand you," she said finally, her voice low. "I don't understand why I haven't killed you yet." Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe it's because you see something in me, too." Syria's heart skipped a beat at his words. She quickly pushed the feeling down. She was a warrior, and warriors didn't show weakness. She didn't have time for this. She couldn't afford to let emotions get in the way of the war. "You're wrong," she said. Though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself, Jack chuckled softly. "Maybe. But whatever the reason, you didn't kill me, and that means something, doesn't it?" For a long time, neither of them spoke. They stood there, locked in a quiet understanding, neither of them willing to admit the truth that seemed to hang in the air between them. Later that evening, Syria's thoughts were still on Jack. She had a duty to her people, a duty to her mission. The aliens had come to Earth with one purpose: to take it, to defeat humanity and claim their resources. But now, everything seemed so much more complicated. She didn't just feel like a soldier anymore. She felt like something else, something human. And she hated herself for it. She sat in her quarters, trying to focus on her orders, on the war plans that her commanders had given her. But no matter how hard she tried, her mind wandered back to Jack. His words, his eyes, his strength, his humanity. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the thoughts, but they lingered, refusing to be ignored. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at her door. It was one of her officers. "Captain, we've received an update from the front lines. The humans are preparing for their final stand. They're expecting an assault. It's time to end this." Syria's chest tightened. She knew this moment was coming. The final push. Earth would fall, and the humans, including Jack, would be nothing more than enemies to be defeated. But something inside her resisted. She didn't want to destroy them. She didn't want to destroy him. "I'll be there in a moment," she said, her voice betraying nothing of the internal struggle she was facing. The officer left, and Syria stood up. She walked over to the window, gazing out into the endless stars. Her heart was torn between two worlds. She had a duty to her people, but she couldn't ignore the strange connection she had with Jack. It felt as though fate had woven their paths together, and no matter how hard she tried to deny it, she couldn't break free from that bond. The next morning, Syria made her way to the command center. The time had come. The final battle would begin. But as she prepared to lead the charge, a thought crossed her mind. What if there was another way? What if she didn't have to destroy the humans? What if she could end this war without more bloodshed? But the plan had already been set, and her people depended on her. She couldn't afford to back down now. As she entered the command center, she saw the map of Earth spread out before her. The enemy lines were drawn. It was time to attack. The war would finally come to an end. But for Syria, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like something much worse. Her thoughts turned to Jack again. And for the first time, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Jack was ready for whatever came next. The alien forces were preparing to launch their final assault, and he knew he had to act fast. He didn't know what Saria was planning, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her win. But as he stood there, waiting for the battle to begin, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything had already changed. The war had reached its boiling point. Saria stood at the helm of her alien fleet, her eyes fixed on the holographic map in front of her. The Earth was within her grasp, and the final assault was about to begin. She had always known this moment would come, but now that it was here, she felt a weight pressing down on her chest that she couldn't shake. The alien leaders had made their orders clear. Humanity must fall. There could be no mercy, no second chances. Saria was their strongest warrior, and they trusted her to bring victory. But as she looked at the map, her mind kept drifting back to Jack, the human prisoner she had spared, the human soldier who had challenged her, who had fought with a strength she had never expected. For the first time in her life, Saria felt a conflict inside her. Her duty to her people warred with the strange feelings she had for Jack. She had never been one to hesitate. But now, every time she thought about the upcoming battle, she wondered if she could do it. Could she really destroy the humans? Saria's officer, Corin, entered the room, snapping her out of her thoughts. His expression was stern, and his voice was low. "Captain, we are ready. The attack will begin as soon as you give the order." Saria didn't speak right away. She could feel the pressure building inside her, the weight of her responsibility to her people, and the strange connection she felt toward the human soldier. She glanced at Corin, who was waiting for her command. "The humans have been pushed back to their last stronghold," Corin continued. "If we strike now, it will be over." Saria nodded slowly, her mind racing. "Prepare the fleet," she said, her voice steady. "We begin the attack in 1 hour." Meanwhile, Jack sat in his cell, staring out at the stars. He knew what was coming, the final assault. He could feel the tension in the air. The aliens were ready to wipe out humanity once and for all. But Jack wasn't ready to give up. He had survived so much already. He wouldn't let the aliens take Earth without a fight. But as he sat there, lost in thought, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more going on. Something between him and Saria. He had fought her on the battlefield, and she had defeated him, yet she had spared his life. Why? Jack wasn't the type to believe in fate. But when he thought about Saria, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to their encounter than just a fight. She had tasted his blood, and something had changed inside her. He had felt it too. It was as if their paths were somehow connected. He knew he had to do something. He couldn't just sit back and wait for the aliens to destroy everything. He had to find a way to stop the attack. But how? The alien forces were too strong, and Saria was their leader. Just then, the door to his cell opened. Jack looked up to see Saria standing in the doorway. She looked different today. There was something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before, a flicker of uncertainty. Her armor gleamed in the dim light, but her posture was less confident than usual. Saria stepped inside, her gaze meeting his. "You're awake," she said softly, her voice almost a quiet. "I'm awake," Jack replied, sitting up on his cot. He could feel the tension in the air, but he didn't know what to say. It had been days since their last conversation, and neither of them had spoken much since then. Saria looked at him for a moment, her eyes filled with something Jack couldn't understand. "I came to speak to you." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Speak? To me? What about?" Saria hesitated before speaking. "The attack. It's happening soon. Earth's last stand. It will be over today." Jack felt his heart race. He knew what she was talking about. The final assault. Humanity's last chance to survive. But what could he say? The odds were against them. The alien forces were too strong. But Saria's words made him think. There was a part of her that didn't want this. He could see it in her eyes. She didn't want to destroy Earth. She didn't want to fight him. Jack stood up and took a step closer to the bars of his cell. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice low but firm. "You don't have to destroy Earth. There's still time to stop it. You can still make a choice." Saria's eyes widened, and she stepped back slightly. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. I can't stop it. The fleet is already in motion. My people won't allow me to back down. Jack took another step forward. You're not just a soldier. Saria, you're a person. You have a choice. You don't have to follow orders if you don't believe in them. Saria's eyes flashed. With something anger, fear, confusion. You don't know what it's like to be bound by duty. To be trained your whole life to do one thing. To be part of something bigger than yourself. I do know, Jack said quietly. I've been part of something bigger, too. I've fought for my people, for my planet. But I also know what it's like to be forced to do things you don't believe in. And I know that there's a better way than this. Saria looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She seemed torn, as if she wanted to believe him, but something inside her was holding her back. Finally, she spoke. I can't stop it, Jack, but I can't kill you either. I don't know why, but I can't. Jack's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment. He had to convince her. He had to make her see the truth. You don't have to kill anyone. There's still time. We can stop this together. Saria stood still, her gaze fixed on him. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, finally, she spoke. I'll try. She whispered. The words hung in the air, filled with uncertainty, but also hope. Jack didn't know if they had time to stop the war. But for the first time, he felt like there was a chance. A chance that he and Saria might be able to end this conflict without more bloodshed. As Saria turned to leave, she paused and looked back at him. I'll do what I can, Jack, but I can't promise anything. Jack nodded. That's all I ask. And as she walked away, Jack felt a small spark of hope flicker inside him. Perhaps, against all odds, they could still change the course of the war. The hours after their conversation were filled with a restless tension that neither Jack nor Saria could ignore. Saria paced in her quarters, her mind torn between her duty as a warrior and the strange bond she shared with Jack. She had never been one to question orders, but this felt different. There was a force inside her that wanted to believe in something more, something beyond war and destruction. Jack, in his cell, was also deep in thought. He knew that Saria had made a choice, but he didn't know if it was enough. The war was nearing its end, and the alien fleet was preparing for its final assault on Earth. He had no illusions about the strength of the alien forces, but there was still a part of him that held onto hope. Maybe Saria could change things. Maybe, together, they could find a way to stop the destruction. But as the hours ticked by, the reality of the situation began to set in. There were forces at play far beyond their control. The alien leaders were not the kind to forgive disobedience, and Saria knew that her hesitation could cost her everything. Her own people, her own soldiers were ready to carry out the mission. The attack would happen, whether she stopped it or not. Saria stood before the large window of her ship, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. The stars twinkled, distant and cold, and she could almost feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her. She had spent her life fighting for something, for a cause she had been taught to believe in. But now, with Jack's words echoing in her mind, she wasn't so sure anymore. Captain, the fleet is ready. Corn's voice broke through her thoughts. His tone was firm, as always, but there was an edge of impatience in it. Saria turned to face him, her expression unreadable. The attack will begin in 1 hour, Corn continued. We will strike Earth's final stronghold. There will be no mercy. Saria's eyes flickered with doubt. She had always been the one to lead her troops with unwavering confidence. But now, the thought of destroying everything she had fought, for the thought of destroying Jack was almost too much to bear. I'll be there shortly, she said, her voice distant. She needed time to think, time to decide. But deep down, she already knew what she had to do. There was no escaping her fate. Back in his cell, Jack sat quietly, waiting for something to happen. The silence was suffocating, but he had learned to find peace in it. His mind kept returning to Saria, to their shared moments of understanding. He knew she was conflicted. He had seen it in her eyes. But would it be enough to stop the war? Just as he was about to lose hope, the door to his cell opened. It wasn't a guard. It was Saria. She stood in the doorway, her face shadowed, her armor gleaming in the dim light of the ship. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was a quiet understanding between them, an understanding that had been built on the strange connection they had shared since their first encounter. "I've made a decision," Saria said finally, her voice low but steady. Jack stood up, his heart racing. "What decision?" Saria hesitated, then stepped into the cell. She closed the door behind her, her eyes scanning the room. "I can't let this war continue. I can't destroy Earth. I won't be the one to carry out that order." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "You're going to stop it?" Saria nodded. "I'm going to try. But I can't do it alone. I need you." Jack didn't hesitate. "Then we do this together." Saria looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But we can't just walk out of here. The fleet is already in motion. If we don't act quickly, it will be too late." Jack glanced toward the door. He knew they had little time. He had no idea how they could escape, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. "We'll find a way." Saria took a deep breath. "There's a back exit to the ship. I can get us there. But once we're out, there's no going back. We'll be fugitives." Jack's mind raced. He didn't care. He wasn't going to let the aliens destroy Earth. He wasn't going to let Saria's people win, not if it meant killing everyone he loved. "Let's go." The escape was chaotic, to say the least. Saria led the way, moving swiftly and silently. Through the halls of the ship, they passed through dark corridors, avoiding patrols and security cameras. Jack stayed close to her, trusting her completely despite the danger they were in. They reached the back exit, a hidden door that led to a small shuttle bay. Saria quickly punched in the access code, and the door slid open. The small shuttle inside was waiting for them, its engines ready to take them away from the alien ship. But as Saria stepped inside, a voice echoed through the ship's speakers. "Captain Saria, you are ordered to report to the command center immediately. Failure to comply will result in severe consequences." Saria's heart raced. She knew they were running out of time. The alarm had been triggered. Their escape had been discovered. She motioned for Jack to get into the shuttle. "Go," she whispered. "I'll hold them off." Jack hesitated, his eyes filled with concern. "I'm not leaving you." Saria shook her head. "You have to. You're the only one who can stop this. If we don't get away now, it will be too late. I'll catch up to you." With one last look, Jack ran into the shuttle and took the controls. As the ship's engines roared to life, Saria watched him go, her heart heavy with the knowledge that they were no longer just soldiers. They were rebels now, fighting for a cause neither of them had ever believed in before. Saria turned to face the hallway. She had made her choice. She had turned her back on her people, on the war, and now she would have to face the consequences. The shuttle soared into the sky, breaking free from the alien ship's grasp. Jack looked down at the ship growing smaller in the distance. He had no idea what would happen next. But one thing was clear: he had to stop the alien fleet before it reached Earth. And no matter what happened, he would do it with Saria by his side. The stars were quiet as Jack piloted the shuttle, his hands gripping the controls. The ship hummed beneath him, and the vastness of space stretched out in every direction. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he couldn't shake the sense of urgency that pulsed through him. The alien fleet was still out there, preparing to strike Earth, and Saria had just made the decision to break away from her people, to risk everything to stop the war. He wasn't about to let her down. He glanced at the empty seat beside him, where Saria had stood only moments before, helping him navigate the ship. She had given him the chance to escape, to act, to stop the war. He knew that whatever happened next, they had to act quickly. As they flew further from the alien ship, the silence between them felt heavier than ever. Jack's mind kept returning to Saria, her decision to leave her army, to go against everything she had been taught, was something he could never have expected. But in that moment, he had seen something in her, something that made him believe in the possibility of change. Meanwhile, aboard the alien ship, Saria was running out of time. She had gone against her orders, and now the consequences were inevitable. Her decision had not come lightly. She had spent her entire life training for this moment, for the war. But in Jack, She had seen something she couldn't ignore. He had made her question everything: her purpose, her duty, and what it truly meant to be a warrior. Saria moved quickly through the corridors, her footsteps echoing on the cold metal floor. She had to find a way to stop the alien fleet. She couldn't let them destroy Earth. She couldn't let Jack's people suffer, not when she had a chance to make things right. She found herself standing before the War Council, her heart pounding. In her chest, the leaders of the alien forces were seated around a massive table, their eyes fixed on her as she entered the room. Their expressions were stern, cold, and unyielding. They had no sympathy for traitors. Captain Saria, one of the council members, said, his voice filled with authority. "You have betrayed your people, you have defied orders, and you will be held accountable." Saria stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I did what I thought was right," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I cannot allow the destruction of Earth. We cannot continue this war." The council members exchanged glances, but none of them spoke. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, the head of the council spoke. "Your actions have put everything we have worked for at risk. You will be removed from command and imprisoned for your betrayal." Saria didn't flinch. She had expected this. "Do what you must," she said. "But the war ends now. I will not be part of this destruction." The council leader's expression hardened. "You will regret this decision." Saria turned and walked out of the room without another word. She knew what she had to do. The War Council would not stop her. She had made her choice, and now it was time to follow through. Back in the shuttle, Jack's hands tightened around the controls as a red warning light flashed on the dashboard. He knew something wasn't right. The alien ship's systems must have detected their escape, and it wouldn't be long before they were pursued. "Come on," Jack muttered to himself. "There's no time for mistakes now." He adjusted the shuttle's speed, his heart racing as he navigated through asteroid fields, hoping to avoid detection. He had no idea where they would go once they were out of the alien fleet's reach. But Earth was still their goal. If he could make it back to Earth, he might be able to warn his people. He might still have a chance to stop the alien forces from invading Dot. As the shuttle hurtled through space, Jack felt the weight of their situation pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for Earth, for the people he loved, and for Saria, the alien captain, who had changed everything. He could feel the connection between them, even across the vastness of space. And as much as he tried to push it aside, he knew that their destinies were intertwined. Back on the alien ship, Saria worked quickly. She had accessed the ship's central command system and overridden the security measures. It wasn't easy. The ship's systems were complex, and she had to move quickly before the council found out what she was doing. But she was determined. There was no turning back now. With a few quick keystrokes, Saria initiated a transmission to the human forces. She didn't know if they would receive it, but she had to try. She had to warn them of the alien fleet's attack to give them a fighting chance. She had betrayed everything she knew, but now, for the first time in her life, she was fighting for something that mattered more than her duty. She was fighting for Earth. The transmission sent, and Saria stood back, her heart pounding in her chest. It was done. Now, all she could do was wait. Hours passed, and Jack's shuttle continued to drift through space, heading toward Earth. The warnings had stopped, but Jack knew they couldn't relax just yet. There were still threats out there. The alien fleet could be closing in on them at any moment. But Jack had to believe that there was still hope. If Saria had done what he thought she had, then the battle wasn't lost yet. He looked out the window of the shuttle, watching as the stars blurred past. Earth was out there, waiting. He would do whatever it took to get there and stop the aliens from destroying it. He had to believe that they could make it. Suddenly, a message blinked onto the shuttle screen. It was from an unknown source, but the words were unmistakable. Saria had sent a transmission. "We are coming," it read. "Earth will be saved." Jack's heart surged. He knew it was her. He knew that Saria had found a way to stop the war. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe in the possibility of peace. As the shuttle moved closer to Earth, Jack looked ahead, his heart filled with hope. This was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over, but it was a fight they could win together.